that Molly was telling me that my dad hit her and that he was abusive, and I want to be absolutely clear that I never, ever saw my dad hit or hurt Molly, ever.
She wouldn't understand just how wrong things were until years later in Ireland.
And we saw what a loving family is like, and we learned that what happened in our house and the way that Molly treated everyone was not normal, and it wasn't okay, and it was abuse.
What Sarah said doesn't give us the full story, but her words immediately opened up a series of unanswered questions. How did the Martins persuade the children to betray their own dad? What was the true emotional cost for a child forced to betray her father's memory? And how did Tracy, Jason's sister, react to the children's testimony? To understand what really happened to Jason Corbett, we need to go back to the beginning. Before the lies, before the silence.
Davidson County 911, what is the emergency?
My name is Tom Martins. I'm at 160 Panther Creek Court, and we need help.
There was a pause just long enough to wonder what kind of help he meant. Then his voice returned, composed but curiously devoid of panic.
What's going on there?
My daughter's husband, my son-in-law, got in a fight with my daughter. I intervened, and I think he's in bad shape. We need help.
Moments later, police stepped into something they weren't prepared for. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, the bed, the walls. It was the kind of scene that stops you cold. Jason Corbett was lying on the bedroom floor, his skull crushed, his body broken. Right beside him were the weapons, a concrete paving stone and a Louisville Slugger baseball bat, both stained with blood and pieces of what used to be a man's life. Later in the interview room, detectives didn't rush. They let the silence breathe, giving Molly all the space in the world to tell her side. And when she finally did, it was quick, flat, and disturbingly easy.
I hit him on the head.
While Tom Martins remained composed on the surface, his story slowly began to fracture. What first sounded confident soon felt too rehearsed, like a script carefully memorized but not fully lived.
So I open the bedroom door, and he's got Molly by the throat. And I hit him with the baseball bat. And he reaches out and he grabs the bat, and he's stronger than I am. And he pushes me down, and I'm scrambling on the floor, glasses fall off. Now I'm thinking, he's gonna kill me.
There were 6 people staying in the house that night. Jason Corbett and his second wife, Molly, her parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, who were staying over, and Jason's 2 children from his first marriage, Jack, who was 10, and Sarah, who was aged 8. Each of them would carry a different version of what happened, but only one would never speak again. And while all eyes would fall on Jason's final moments, there was something about Tom Martin's wife, something that didn't sit right, not that night, not ever. But to understand how they all ended up in that house, we need to start with the man at the center.
I didn't know Jason Corbett personally, but from talking to his family, his friends, neighbours, people he went to school with, he does come across as a remarkable, a sound Irishman. Not your typical Irishman in some ways. I mean, one of the things that struck me about him was that he was quite a romantic man.
Jason Corbett, 39 years old, had once lived a very different life in Limerick, Ireland, where he was born and raised. After losing his wife, Margaret Maggs Fitzpatrick, to a sudden asthma attack in 2006, Jason was left to raise 2 small children, Jack and Sarah, on his own. In 2008, he hired an American nanny named Molly Martins to help him care for them. It wasn't long before Molly became more than the nanny. The relationship moved fast, and by 2011, they were married. Jason packed up his life in Ireland and relocated to the United States with his kids to be with her. But not everyone was convinced by Molly. Behind her polished smile, there were early red flags.
I'd come in contact with an ex-boyfriend of Molly Martin's, Keith McGinn.
Her ex-boyfriend later described her as unstable.
The first time I met her, I was just floored because she was stunning. To her credit, she did tell me early on that she had bipolar. She was no longer able to work or anything. She pretty much couldn't keep a job. She couldn't do the nannying stuff anymore.
People close to the family said Molly had a way of bending the truth when it suited her. She often recorded conversations, quietly placing recorders in the car, the bedroom, and even beneath furniture. Jason's family started to feel something was off, but whenever they raised concerns, he brushed them aside, unwilling to say much. Molly's presence cast a growing shadow, but no one knew just how dark it would become. Earlier that evening, Jason had been outside on the driveway, sharing a few drinks with a neighbor. Everything in the house seemed ordinary, nothing out of place. But then, out of nowhere, Molly's parents showed up. Jason hadn't been told they were coming. He hadn't expected anyone. But in the 24 hours leading up to that night, Molly had made several phone calls to her parents. What exactly was said during those calls remains unknown. Still, Jason got up, walked over to the car, took their suitcases out of the trunk, and brought them inside. Pizza was ordered, drinks were poured, and the kids were put to bed. From the outside, it looked like any normal night. But inside that house, something had quietly shifted. What police stepped into was a bedroom soaked in blood. Everywhere on the bed, the floor, and the walls. The air was heavy, the floor was slippery. Jason was lying on the ground, unresponsive and unclothed. The blood wasn't fresh. Some of it had already started to dry and thicken.
Corporal Dagenhart, the first police officer on site, to him, blood from a body would be normally runny, but he noticed that the blood had started to dry and that it was congealed. He said it was like jello or jelly.
Paramedics arrived and attempted CPR, but it was already too late. Jason had no pulse, no signs of life, and his body was cold to the touch. But what stood out even more was this. Both Tom and Molly were trained in CPR, yet neither of them had made any effort to help before first responders arrived. The weapons, if they could even be called that, were still in place. A concrete paving stone, usually used to edge a garden path, sat on the floor, caked in blood and Jason's hair. The metal Louisville Slugger baseball bat was worse. It too had Jason's blood, hair, and even tissue embedded in its grooves. Molly Martins, the woman who claimed she'd been attacked, was sitting calmly on the steps outside. She kept touching her neck. Officers noted it.
Lady who's interviewing her, she very quickly cops that she's rubbing her neck all the time.
Why do you keep grabbing your neck? I'm sorry. It hurts.
But as she examines her, she's finding nothing.
I'm going to get some pictures and see if we can find any injuries.
Molly Martin's, not a mark, not a bruise, no swelling. And she had a very fine bracelet on her that night, still intact, a hair clip, still intact.
Her father, Tom Martins, the man who said he'd fought for his daughter's life, also had no defensive wounds. His red t-shirt had blood on it, but his body did not. One investigator said it was beyond what anyone would call self-defense.
You didn't survive his injuries, right? I didn't think so. No, he didn't survive his injuries. At this point, after talking to your dad and talking to you, looks like this is going to be self-defense. Okay? I don't think there's going to be an issue with that.
Then came the realization there were still children in the house.
Corporal Dagenhart, he said that he had gone upstairs to the two children. He woke Sarah up and he said he lifted her into his arms and he told her to close her eyes because he had seen there was a trail of blood going all the way from the master bedroom out the front door. He cupped her head in his hand and he led her down the stairs, and she was looking back up at her brother. You know, another colleague was doing the same, and he said to her, "Don't worry, he's okay."
After the children were safely taken from the house, the immediate investigation continued. Tom and Molly Martins were brought in for questioning and placed in separate interview rooms just a few miles from the crime scene.
Tom Martins, in his interviews hours after Jason Corbett has been murdered so brutally, he's very much controlled after such a chaotic scene has played out only hours earlier.
Tom Martins, as we mentioned, had a long career in the FBI, but he didn't act like someone who had just killed his son-in-law. He was composed, confident, even relaxed. And then, without hesitation, he planted the first seed of doubt.
He's trying to associate himself with the police officers, like they're one and the same. And he sets out the scene for them. And within 2 minutes, he has suggested that Jason Corbett has been involved in killing his first wife. As in, he says that she died in mysterious circumstances.
His first wife died in mysterious circumstances. The finding was that she had an asthma attack in his car. She died of asphyxiation.
And he also uses the word asphyxiation, which could be seen as a criminal term, when in fact her death certificate in Limerick shows clearly that she died of asthma attack.
Molly, meanwhile, was far less polished. In the recordings, she fumbled over her words, often sounding like a frightened child.
I don't know. Can we stop? You said we could stop.
Right. How many times did you get Jason?
I don't know.
Okay, you don't remember?
I don't know.
Okay.
I should have screamed.
And yet, even in that state, she managed to align her story with her father's nearly word for word.
But she's got her story quite straight, and her story is very similar at the same time to the one that's playing out in the next room.
I never told him any physical abuse. I told him verbal abuse. And I told him emotional.
And I don't think she told us everything. But he was very controlling and abusive.
As Tom continued to speak, his story remained steady, but certain details started to raise questions. He said the baseball bat had been in the bedroom as a gift for Jason's son, Jack, but it was a metal bat, not the kind you give to a child. And the paving stone? That explanation didn't come from Tom at all. It was Molly who later claimed the brick was there for an art project she had planned with the kids, a detail that felt oddly specific and oddly timed.
The kids and I are gonna paint these bricks and
Detectives nodded politely, but they weren't buying it. What stood out most to investigators was the overall lack of shock. Tom remained composed, almost detached. Molly, on the other hand, was emotional, but even through the tears, her story stayed tightly aligned with her father's. There were no outbursts, no signs of trauma from the brutal scene they had just left. Instead, the focus in both rooms seemed to be the same: justify what happened and shape the narrative before anyone else could.
She's concerned about the children.
I'm scared they'll try to take the kids.
You guys are legally married?
Yes.
Did you adopt the children?
No.
Okay, then that's a real possibility.
Oh. Oh, God.
The jury listened in stunned silence as the state's medical examiner, Dr. Craig Nelson, explained what had happened to Jason Corbett. The damage was so severe that fragments of bone had entered his brain. There were no defensive wounds, nothing on his hands or arms. He hadn't fought back. Dr. Nelson confirmed something that left the courtroom stunned. Several of the blows were post-mortem, delivered after Jason was already dead. These weren't defensive injuries. They were acts of pure aggression. Even when Jason posed no threat, the attack continued. It was violent and excessive, and it showed a total absence of mercy.
Craig Nelson, who was the pathologist, said that the injuries were so severe and so repeated that he couldn't accurately count the number of blows that were suffered to Jason's skull.
The prosecution then exposed what they believed was the real motive: custody. Jason's will, written in 2011, declared that if anything ever happened to him, full guardianship of his children would go to his sister, Tracy Lynch, and her husband, David, in Limerick, Ireland. Molly Martins wasn't even mentioned.
There was some disparaging remarks regarding Molly and the relationship, and there was disparaging remarks brought up by Molly towards Jason.
Tracy had brought Jason's will over, which said that in the event of his death, herself and her husband were to be appointed guardians of both the children.
In the will, Jason expressed that he wished for a guardian to be his sister and her husband. And so in North Carolina, the law states that we should give that great weight. We don't have to follow it.
During closing arguments, the prosecution laid out their final theory. Jason's death wasn't a sudden act of defense. It was something far more calculated. It was portrayed as self-defense, but it looked more like premeditated violence. As the medical images were shown to the jury, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed.
I had seen these images, and we made the decision that they were just too graphic and too upsetting to use, particularly because of the upset I think they would have caused the family.
Without seeing these, and they're very graphic, so you don't see them for a reason, outside of a courtroom, they point to the sheer ferocity of force that's used. I have covered a lot of murder trials, both in Ireland and abroad, and you do see graphic crime scene photos. In terms of damage done, never ever have I seen anything like this, and I'll never ever forget it, never.
After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found both Thomas Michael Martins, age 67, and Molly Corbett Martins, age 33, guilty of second-degree murder. They were each sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison by Judge David Lee.
A jury has returned a unanimous guilty verdict in the trial of a father and daughter accused of the second-degree murder of Limerick man Jason Corbett. The former FBI agent Thomas Martins and his daughter Molly, who was married to Mr. Corbett, had denied the charge.
Jason's family believed it was over, that justice had finally spoken. But the Court of Appeals overturned both convictions, citing that the trial judge had improperly excluded testimony from Jason's children, Jack and Sarah Corbett. The defense argued that their testimonies could support claims of emotional abuse by Jason, but Jason's family believed the children had been manipulated. It was later revealed Molly's family had coerced the children, specifically by threatening to separate them if they did not align their statements with the defense's narrative. Sarah was told she would never see Jack again. Jack was told the same. It's hard to imagine being just a child and forced to make a choice like that. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Still, the court granted a retrial. By March 2021, Tom and Molly Martins were released on bail, having served less than 4 years.
Molly and her father, Thomas Martins, have been released on bail after the courts overturned their murder convictions.
I was absolutely stunned that they were out. Absolutely stunned.
While I knew it was very possible they were going to get out, those images of them walking free from jail were very poignant. I really felt for Jason's family.
With her possessions in a paper bag, Molly Martins left jail and did not speak to weighty media. The 37-year-old and her 71-year-old father, Thomas Martins, had been in prison less than 4 years.
On November 17, 2023, just weeks before the retrial, Tom and Molly Martins accepted a plea deal in Forsyth County Superior Court. The original murder charges were dropped. Both pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and felony assault with a deadly weapon. Tom, now 73, was sentenced to 51 to 74 months. but walked free that same day due to time already served. Molly, now 40, received a slightly longer sentence, but was also released within weeks. The court's decision to let Tom and Molly Martins walk free was a crushing blow for Jason's children. Sarah and Jack felt abandoned, not only by those who had used them, but by a justice system that believed the lies. It was also a huge blow for Tracy Lynch. She had fought for justice for years. While she understood Sarah was a child forced into that lie, its consequences were impossible for Tracy to ignore. Jason Corbett is now buried in Castle Mungret Cemetery, Limerick, far from where he was killed. And the people who took his life, they're free. The only ones who truly know what happened in that bedroom are the ones who walked out of it alive. What happened to Jason was horrific. But what if I told you there was someone who didn't just kill, but ate his victim's genitals? But what twisted need drove him to do something so inhuman, and how he evaded police for 13 years? Click the video on screen to step inside the mind of the Milwaukee cannibal. If you think you're ready, and if this story kept you watching, tap the like button, hit subscribe for more stories that need to be heard, and share it. Someone else might need to hear the truth too.